millions of people go to college.
Right.
College is a multi-billion-dollar operation. We've been taught to consume. You want to go to college, you have to pay for it. You're a customer to the institution, thereby investing. Is this a good investment? What is my ROI or return on my investments? These are not students, they're investors. They're choosing to come to your campus to invest in your institution. Therefore, the students must hold the institutions accountable for the investments that they have, and they have to choose wisely.
Dr. Angelina Carvalhal, visionary thought leader who's trying to shift the way that higher education functions and even furthermore, how we learn. What are some of the challenges that you have found, particularly higher education?
What generally happens in the fall, enrollments peak. Lots of students get very excited, they come in, and then the spring happens and it drops.
Why should someone choose college over alternatives, such as online universities or YouTube videos, let's just say, as the outline?
You never know who you'll be in class with. I wouldn't necessarily get that from online, looking at a YouTube, right? I won't get that networking opportunity that I will get sitting in a classroom. I may be sitting next to the next millionaire or billionaire.
What are some of the careers that you see taking off?
Well, right now, because AI is huge, it's expanding. When you think of AI, I would say in the next 10 years, higher education is going to be completely different.
Welcome to another episode of the Real Mentors Podcast. You already know, real examples, altering lives is what that acronym stands for. And today I'm honored to have in the studio Dr. Angelina Carvalhal, who is a visionary thought leader who's trying to shift the way that higher education functions and even furthermore, how we learn. So I'm going to let her get right to it. She's got her consulting firm, ANC Consulting, that is on this mission to change the way that we learn in a higher education setting. Welcome to the show today. How are you, Doc?
I am so good. Thank you so much for having me, Sean. Good to be here.
Thank you for commuting out here and finding your way all the way out into Suffolk County today.
No problem.
It's a pleasure to have you.
Likewise.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background in education.
Sure. So, boy, I've been in education for quite some time, about 18 years now. I'm an immigrant from South America, Guyana. Yay.
Yes, sir. Shout out.
Yeah, and I immigrated when I was very, very young, at a tender age of 2. I'm Guyanese, but I grew up in America.
Brooklyn,
Brooklyn, of course,
yes,
all the way. Brooklyn, all the way. Absolutely. But very much in a Caribbean, South American household. So grew up with, that mindset. You're in America, you got to be a go-getter. Mm-hmm. You got to do your thing. You got to focus hard, work very, very hard on your education, try to get a job, to live the American dream. And I was fortunate. I had a mom and a dad around me, and my beautiful sister, and we worked hard. I saw my parents work very, very hard. They went to school, they had jobs. So we worked, we grew up in a working class family, and I just wanted to do the same thing. So I'm fortunate to be here and kind of went into higher education, and I've been there ever since.
Growing up in the Bronx and growing up uptown in the Bronx, even though I'm Dominican, Puerto Rican, I grew up, mostly African American, a lot of Puerto Ricans, some white, but we kind of bordered on what we call Little Jamaica in the Bronx, which is uptown, White Plains Road.
Right.
Shout out to Uptown Bronx.
That's right.
So I really got to see the difference, from the Caribbean culture and Jamaicans, Guyanese, not the same, but very similar in terms of their passion for education. And we see that much more now in the Asian community migrating to the United States, and education is paramount.
Absolutely.
The Caribbean, Guyana also has that same thing with the work ethic that we're going to have to earn our place here.
Absolutely.
And that was placed on you early on.
Absolutely.
What are some of the challenges that you have found in education, particularly higher education, throughout your travels?
Well, speaking to different institutions, different individuals and institutions, the biggest challenge that institutions have are enrollments. Keeping enrollments, keeping students engaged. So what generally happens in the fall, enrollments peak. Lots of students get very excited. They come in and they stay for the semester, and then the spring happens and it drops. And it's always up and down, up and down. So schools are challenged with really keeping students engaged, interacting with students, and keeping them on campus. That's the biggest challenge I see. And when I speak to people, it's pretty much the same thing. How do we keep the students engaged? How do we get them to stay on campus? And that's what I've seen very small institutions to very large institutions. It's always about enrollment and student engagement.
Are you working with institutions that are located in the inner city, or some of the things that are, or some of the institutions that may be in more rural areas, like that campus lifestyle,
Sure.
that country club lifestyle that, my four-year college afforded me, which I got to see the contrast because I'm also a product of Bronx Community College.
Right.
So I saw education one way,
Sure.
and then I saw what City College, and then I got to go upstate and see Ithaca College.
Sure.
And boy, oh boy, it was like,
Different.
I'm at a golf, golf country club right now.
Sure.
I'm coming here.
Sure.
And what kinds of institutions are you familiar with? And is this enrollment problem, is that a story that all universities go through, or specific universities?
That's a good question. So the universities that I work with, universities and colleges, both in rural settings and in city settings. So, throughout New Jersey, throughout Pennsylvania, throughout New York City. So it's very different. Some private institutions, some public institutions. So it's different. Enrollments are not a challenge with a certain set of universities. So the Ivies, if you put the Ivies aside, their brand power will always, they have, students always wanting to get into that institution. But the smaller second and third tier institutions, that's where they struggle. Brand power is not as strong. Brand recognition is not as strong, and the connection is not as strong. And it's for a host of different reasons. Funding is usually a challenge at many institutions. They're always trying to figure out ways to drive funding. How do we get funding? And because they're focused on that, sometimes the students, while they're doing it for student benefits, they kind of miss the pieces of actually interacting with students in a more authentic way. And students don't necessarily see that they're doing that. So sometimes it's that. Good intentions, but they're not really putting the pieces together and looking at the big picture.
I love that you mentioned brand, because college is a business.
Sure.
And we spoke about that off camera, and you mentioned also enrollment. Having enrollment is like Netflix. If the subscriptions went down for a year,
Right.
the stock would tumble.
Absolutely.
So it is a business.
Absolutely.
How do you navigate the fine line between being an immigrant who knows the value of education and what it can bring in terms of lifting people out of poverty, people of color, women of color, and the business component? Because that's got to be a fine line to walk as someone who knows the values, but also, if we're being honest, maybe aware of some of the pitfalls of education.
Sure. That's a great question. And it is a fine line. It's a very delicate balance to walk. So first and foremost, let's take a step back. When you talk about business in the terms that you and I would talk of, and you take it to the academy, they're usually like, it's not a business. It's not a business.
Right. They don't want to hear it.
They don't want to hear it, right? So the first thing is realizing and saying, it's a service. You're providing a service and you're being paid for a service. Therefore, it is a business. In the institution, in the academy, there are two sides of the academy. There is the student center side, or the student services side, and then there's the auxiliary services side, right? So there's the academic side, and then there's the auxiliary side. The auxiliary side of the institution is really there to drive the revenue through different, programs that they bring in, whether it's your campus bookstore or your cafeteria or your parking, things of that nature. And then there is the academician side, which are the professors who are there to educate the students. Oftentimes they don't meet. They have one academic mission, which is the mission of the institution. However, they don't necessarily see eye to eye. And that's where the misconceptions are. They're all working to benefit the institution, the brand, but they haven't really found a cohesive way to marry the two. And it's having that conversation with both sides and saying, okay, auxiliary, you need to really take a look at the faculty and the pains that they go through to really educate the students. And likewise, faculty, take a look at auxiliary and try to figure out how they're running the business. It is a business. It's beyond, what you think it is, and try to marry the two. And oftentimes in institutions, it's in silos, right? They don't work together. Now we're thrusted into a situation where they have to find common ground because funding is an issue in institutions. So now you have to figure out, how do we continue to drive the revenue? How do we continue to educate the students? How are we going to do this? We have to work together. So for the first time in forever, you see the academicians and the auxiliary now sitting at the table and talking. And that's the only way you can really start to have the conversation around business and how do we strategically place programs that will be for the edification of the students and the institution while driving the brand. It's a very, very complicated, complex, and you have to have many different stakeholders in the room. So sometimes it's painstaking, but when you actually bring it together, it's a beautiful thing to see.
Yeah, I have come to embrace the capitalist system, but only because I've found some level of success. But
Sure.
as a kid from the hood in the Bronx, there was always a chip on your shoulder. And there's a chip on so many people's shoulder
Sure.
who don't, first and foremost, understand how the whole system works,
Right.
including education. And furthermore, it seems almost unattainable because very few people look, think, and come from where they come from
Right.
that are people that, you know, they admire or look up to. It's like the one-offs that become the people you admire. And we talk so much about the value of proximity. And you mentioned brands. So Harvard, yes, you're going to get a great education. Are there other institutions where you would probably get an equal or possibly even a better education? I'm going to go out on a limb and say yes,
Yeah,
absolutely,
sure.
110%.
Sure.
There's probably better universities
Sure.
than Harvard and Yale. But the network, the legacy, and the family backgrounds that carried that institutions or institutions to where they are is really, in my opinion, what you're paying for.
Right.
So yes, you're paying for that 4-year or advanced degree, and you're paying a lot of money, and you're working your ass off to get to the point where they'll even accept you.
Right.
But ultimately, what you're paying for is access. You're paying for access to very wealthy, very well-off families and legacy, you know, students
Right.
of these families that
Right.
have contributed so much to these organizations. Which also brings me to having an education and also having a street education. I found the latter to be more valuable in terms of my business dealings.
Right.
Being from the street, you learn how to navigate danger. You know how to assess people,
Take risks.
take risk.
Calculated
obviously.
risk, sure.
Best risk, best investment you'll ever make is in yourself.
Absolutely.
So why should someone in this day and age, with all the resources available to them, choose college over alternatives such as masterminds or even online universities or YouTube videos, let's just say, as the outlier?
Right. Sure.
Why should they?
That's a great, so I loved what you said. And I think when you are making a decision about your future, a young adult, you know, a family is making a decision about their future, they have to shift from the mindset of a consumer to an investor. And it's really important. And I want to break that down a little bit more,
Please.
you know, because we've been taught to consume. You want to go to college, you have to pay for it. You're consuming it. You're a customer to the institution. Whereas if you take a step back and you think about it, you are actually paying the institution, thereby investing in the institution for their services. As an investor, one has to think, when I'm investing in this, how is this a good investment? What is my ROI or return on my investment? So, you know, what major am I going to take on when I get into that institution, and how will that help me post-graduation, 5-10 years out? And that's the way we're not thinking. Most parents are just, you know, trying. You spoke about coming from, you know, the Bronx, right? I came from Brooklyn, you know, working class. We're just trying to work really hard to get our kids to school because we think once they get to school, that's what it is.
Right.
The world is so dynamic and it's changed so much from when you and I went to school, right? So students walk around, young people walk around with computers in their hands, in their pockets. I remember when I had to go to school, I had Encyclopedia Britannica. I might be dating myself.
That's all right. I remember microfilm.
I had books spread out in a library. Students have the power of a computer in the palm of their hand. So it's very, very different. So the rules of engagement is different in an institution. And that's what institutions also have to understand. These are not students. They're investors. They're choosing to come to your campus to invest in your institution. Therefore, the students must hold the institutions accountable for the investments that they have, and they have to choose wisely. And the actual campuses need to understand that every student that walks through that door is a possible donor. So how you treat that student for the 4 years will determine if, when they graduate, if they'll give back to your institution. And when you think of it in that way, the onus is on the school to create programming that keeps those students engaged so they stay on campus. So there is no attrition. There's no fall and spring up and down. And then the students, when they go there, they need to understand that the major that they choose, it's going to land them a career after graduation. So there are a lot of different things happening. The dialogues must start with many different stakeholders in education. They're the students, they're the parents, they're the academicians, there's the auxiliary enterprise. Everyone must come to the table and have these conversations. And it's up to the institutions to open up their doors, to have these frank and open conversations just like you and I are having, and think about the other individuals that should be in the conversation. Once you start to engage a community and you start to open up your network and get different opinions about different things going on your campus, then you stay relevant. That's when students see the value in going to school. That's when students say, this makes sense, because I may be sitting next to, the next entrepreneur, the next big person that will open up, a store, a campus, whatever, a company, right? Where I wouldn't necessarily get that from online, looking at a YouTube, right? I won't get that networking opportunity that I will get sitting in a classroom. I may be sitting next to the next millionaire or billionaire. Right. So thinking along those terms, networking is key. But it's really a conversation that is multi-pronged, and there are lots of different people in it. And to date, institutions have only had the conversations among themselves. They haven't really opened up the doors and allowed different views and opinions to come in and to hear the different aspects and the different feelings that people have. And I think that's the miss. That's where students are not finding the connections. They don't necessarily see themselves in curriculum. They don't see themselves in programming. Therefore, there's no authentic connections, and they see themselves as just another number. And I think those are some of the misnomers that are out there in the industry. But for a student that's thinking about going to college, why should I go to college? Right. You never know who you'll be in class with. Just the networking alone right. is a valuable investment. But once you're there, make sure that you're in the right major, and make sure that major is going to land you a career, not a job that can, springboard you into something else. You're a brand.
What are some of the careers that you see taking off or shifting? Because obviously things are always changing. So anything sure. in the tech field, anything in the software as a service field, sure. anything in artificial intelligence, obviously, or that even revolves around that, which is all encompassing. Mm-hmm. What are some of the subjects that are on the rise, or career paths that are on the rise right now?
Well, right now, because AI is huge, as you said, it's expanding. So, when you think of AI, I would say in the next 10 years, higher education is going to be completely different. And we could talk about that, but it's going to be completely different. And AI is going to be a real driving force behind that. Not in the sense of students, but more in the sense of, the auxiliary folks, the folks that actually work to put, grants and loans together, things of that nature. Right, so I think that
can be done automatically.
Absolutely, which will give them the opportunity to go out on campus, right? They get bogged down with their paperwork, and they're doing it for all the right reasons, right. but they're missing the connections with the students. So this will give them the opportunity to start actually sitting down and having conversations much like this, talking to their constituents to understand what their wants and needs are. I see you smiling.
A wise friend of mine who's in the field told me, AI is not the death of work.
No.
It's the death of boring work.
Yes.
Because, like you just alluded to, it eliminates the need for you to do tedious, redundant, template-based things, whereas ChatGPT, just as an example, there's so many programs, but that's the paramount one.
Yeah.
That can do it all for you in a couple of parameter, sure. Designations. All right, do this. All right, tweak this. Make it sound this way, and we're good to go. But the human touch cannot be replaced.
Absolutely.
So we saw this transition to Zoom. We saw this transition to remote learning during COVID.
Right.
Has the university, how have universities embraced that, integrated that? Do classroom settings look different now, pre-COVID, post-COVID? Obviously I'm far removed from that world, and my kids are still far off from there, so it's just not something that's crossed my path.
Right.
How's that nowadays, and is it moving more to the digital remote, or is it moving back to the one thing that computers can't do, which is replace this?
Right. So it depends on the campus, and it depends on funding. Obviously, institutions realize that they have to move at a quicker pace to embrace technology. But then oftentimes where the problem arises is, okay, so how do we get the technology fitted or retrofitted into our rooms? And then how do we get the faculty, the tenured faculty on board with, the new technology? Oftentimes that is a big roadblock. The younger faculty will embrace teaching in the learning management system, whether it's Canvas, Moodle, Sakai, things of that nature. Whereas the tenured faculty, they don't necessarily want to change their syllabus. God bless them. They don't necessarily want to move forward, and they're afraid to because they don't know how to. So that's a whole learning curve. So there's that slows it down. But funding is usually an issue. Some schools are great at it. Some schools, their Office of Advancement, they're able to raise monies, they're able to get technology. So it's different all over the board, depending on the institution.
So schools attract money from obviously enrollment. I would imagine that's the biggest portion. Mm-hmm. They have endowments. Sure. Some of the larger private, Harvards of the world and these huge endowments are coming under fire now because they're just sitting on billions upon billions, if not tens of billions of dollars. What are some of the challenges facing these mid to small size universities, and how much of the reliance is on enrollment versus bringing in donor money or attracting public funding?
Well, it really depends on the institution. So it's going to be different, but you touched on several different components. So if an institution is really focused, or their revenue, of the lion's share of their revenue is from enrollments, they're going to be challenged because, students are now questioning the validity of going to college. Right. So if it's heavily, on enrollments, then it's going to be a little challenging. Endowments, institutions never really want to touch their endowments, because when you start going into endowments, that means that you really have a problem with enrollments and funding. And that's usually the beginning of the end. Your endowment is supposed to be in the institution for perpetuity, for the point of, sitting on monies that grow, that continue funding other programs. So when you go to your endowments, that is a real problem. So institutions try to stay away from that. As far as donors, there's opportunities with donors, really engaging the alumni and getting donors to actually donate. There's an art to it. And I think a lot of institutions struggle with that. So I want to take a step back a bit.
Yeah, I ignore those phone calls at 9:30 at night all the time.
Well, there's a reason why you ignore them. So let's talk about that, because that really is the elephant in the room. So there's a tremendous potential in, the alumni in any school, right? But where the schools fall short is they don't cultivate that relationship, that human relationship with those students that are on campus that become alum. So I'll tell you a quick little story, or I'll ask you, think about a time you went to a party, or you were invited to a party or an event, or, did you necessarily know the names of the people that invited you?
Recently or back in the day when I was in college?
Recently or?
Not always, but, it depends. It might be an organization, right, or, a law firm, right, or a doctor's office, right, or, company event, but not always.
Right. But did you remember how you felt when you went to the event?
Absolutely.
Right. So was it more about the names of the people or the feeling?
It's always about the feeling.
The feeling.
Human beings are emotional creatures, and we make emotional decisions. Uh-huh. And going to a college is an emotional decision. Mm-hmm. Buying a car is an emotional mm-hmm. decision. Impulse buying is obviously an emotional mm-hmm. decision. Everything that women have to endure, faced with all these outside influences of what beauty is an emotional tug at what you're supposed to look like. Mm-hmm. And if you don't feel good about yourself, this product or service will make you feel better about yourself until it doesn't. And then you buy the next thing.
Exactly. So it's all about emotion. Now think about that emotion, and you tapped on the right thing. You said college is an emotional decision. So if there is that emotion, people spend thousands of dollars on emotions because of the way it makes them feel. And that's the one thing that colleges are not tapping into, the emotions of the student. Now, if you have an emotional connection to someone or something, you may not remember the name of the person, the name of the place, but you remember how you felt when you were there. If it's about the transaction, and you graduate, the transaction is over. You got your degree and the transaction is over. But if it was about how you felt on that campus, did they know me? Did they see me? Did anyone even know my birthday?
Right.
Did they know who I was? Did they see me? How did I feel when I was there? When you get that call and you see it's your school, you will pick up the phone.
Right.
You will donate. So that's where they fall short.
I actually took that job on to call for donations. So I teasingly don't answer because I know what the phone call is. And I don't feel called to donate to a college that is a private institution that has a large endowment and does well, because I think that my money would be better spent elsewhere. But that goes back to maybe they didn't leave a lasting enough emotional impression on me.
That's correct.
Which is quite possible. I have
is
very
the
fond
point.
memories. I was a transfer student. I only did 2 years. I had an amazing time there. Socially, I think for me personally, college was the thing. So it wasn't necessarily the education I got in school.
Right.
I would say I paid attention more at community college and learned more at community college from a textbook perspective. But from life and learning how to interact and actually becoming a college radio jockey and a party promoter and then an entrepreneur, that's where I got my real value from college. Stepping out of New York City, stepping out of the Bronx, stepping out of what I knew into something completely uncomfortable. That was invaluable to me.
Right.
And that speaks to the networking.
Right.
Going back to what you said.
Yeah, tapping into the experiences of students and giving those experiences where they can network, where they have the avenue and the agency to be themselves, where they feel like they're seen. That's tremendous, because when you do reach out to those students, they will absolutely give back. Not only will they give back, they will tell their children this is the best place to go. They become brand ambassadors for your institution. But it starts from day one. It starts from orientation all the way through 4 years. So when you call them, when Alumni Affairs calls that graduate and says, hey, graduate, give back, it's a no-brainer for the graduate, because even if they don't have a tremendous amount of money, they'll give back what they can because of the emotions.
And you hit the nail on the head, because I bet you the biggest endowments are not necessarily, or the biggest donors are probably not the institutions. Obviously the Harvards and the Yales, and like you said, let's take the Ivy League.
Those are the equation.
But you got Michigan, and you got all these places, and you got Ohio State in an 80,000 person stadium, I believe. And I can guarantee you the emotional impact at those huge party schools.
Absolutely.
And I'll say party schools because all college is a big party for the most part.
Yeah.
They're the ones that probably have the biggest donations pool. And I have no knowledge of this, so I'm just taking my out on a limb based on what we're learning here, because they've created these experiences and they had nothing to do with what was taught in the classroom.
Correct.
Not a damn thing.
Correct. Experiences,
Which
very,
brings
very
me
important.
back to how valuable really is college these days in such an ever-changing world. And I know that's a loaded question.
Yeah. It really depends on your situation. So if you're thinking about it as an entrepreneur that's investing in yourself, you have to ask yourself, where do I see myself in 4 years? What do I want to do? And then you make decisions from there. And instead of making that knee-jerk reaction, I'm going to go to school, right? You want to make sure that you're in the right school, that it's the right fit for you. Just like if you're looking for a job, you want to make sure that you're in the right fit for the job that you're looking for. And the institutions and your employer will do the same thing. They want to make sure that it's the right fit. So if you're thinking about going to school, if you're thinking about the next step, you really have to think about 5 years. Don't necessarily think about the here and the now. And it's easier said than done, because when you're a young person, you're like, I don't know. It's easier said than done, but you got to think 5 to 10 years out. That's how an investor thinks.
So 2 questions for you.
Yeah.
In regards to your education, Doc, because you have a PhD and you went all the way with it, were you an investor when you made the decision to go to college? And if not, what was the moment or experience that drove you and made you as passionate as you are about not only consulting universities, but changing the way that they approach how they attract these students?
Yeah, so I didn't become an investor or an investor in my education to myself until after my master's, until after being in higher education and really, collecting stories throughout the years and understanding the challenges that institutions saw and the gaps, seeing the gaps that were out there, and then seeing what students do post-graduation, paying attention to LinkedIn and seeing all of the people looking for jobs on LinkedIn and they can't find it. And I kept asking myself, well, what are they doing? They're following the rules, right? They have a degree, they have an education. Many of them have done, internships and things of that nature, but they're not landing the job. Or if they're landing the job, they're turning very quickly. There's a tremendous amount of attrition where they're turning. And I asked myself, okay, two things. A, do you want to stay where you are in your job? Or do you want to make a change? And if you want to make a change and you want to make an impact, what's the best way for you to do it? Now, in the industry that I'm in, higher education, you don't necessarily get led into conversations if you don't have a terminal degree. That's the first thing. So you have to minimally have a terminal degree for anyone to even take you seriously, right? So for me, as an investor, that was important. It was also important for myself because, I love inquiry. I love the joy of inquiry. And I think if you're going to go in to do something, do it well. Do it to the best of your ability. So for me, going into higher education and deciding this is what I want to do, I wanted to be able to do it from, a place of authority. And for me, going in and getting a degree was important. So I invested in that because I know that investment would open up doors for me, that if I didn't go all the way, may not necessarily have been open for me. For this particular market. That does not say in another market one has to go all the way. So it really depends on your situation. So I became an investor, after my master's and just.
So you made, some of the same, I wouldn't call them mistakes, but you followed the story that
Absolutely.
was given to you.
Absolutely.
Which is, hey, you go to school and you get your 4-year, you took it a step further and you went master's, and then something clicked there.
Yeah.
Where it said, all right, well, if I'm going to invest my time, my energy, and obviously my money in this next level to get this PhD, I'm going to make sure it's in a field that is going to really serve me.
Absolutely.
And what I want to do with this life. And I think that's the difference between advanced degrees and your traditional bachelor's degrees or associates. You can be clueless and get an associate's. You can be clueless and get a bachelor's. I'm testament to both of those things. And I had a bachelor's in economics just because I didn't want to change. And, I knew it's like sociology. You can do anything. But I really took a liking to the advertising public relations minor, which is essentially marketing, PR, things like that.
Sure.
And even though I didn't do it in a corporate space, it serves me to no end to this day. So there's incredible value in education. And I always like to say, I see both sides. So as an entrepreneur, I see the complete worthlessness of going to a higher education. But as someone who comes from poverty and whose mother immigrated here in the 1960s and was the first of her generation and only of her generation to graduate with a college degree until my cousins and I in the next generation, I saw the value in lifting people out of poverty.
Sure.
And what sucks is, the family structure wasn't there. So she was a single mom, and even though she was college educated, she worked for the city of New York, never made more than $50,000 a year, but she did very fulfilling work and helped a lot of people along the way. But because we didn't have that second income, we were still in the projects and we couldn't make it out. That's not the best scenario and setup for what I'm trying to say here, but I just wanted to be honest about my story.
Yeah.
Because I think education has the ability to lift so many people that have never attained it in their family lineage to get over the hump.
Sure.
But then I meet a lot of young people who have their degrees and they're still struggling.
Yeah.
But they're just struggling at a higher level. So their expenses got more and their car got nicer, but they're still struggling. What are some of the trends we're seeing? Is there any hybrid approach to education where maybe people are going to school but not looking for a degree? I don't know. Is there anything unique happening in the space? As an outsider looking in, I'm interested to know, because we are seeing a deterioration in what people consider to be the value of higher education. And we're seeing the struggles of enrollment. And I'm going to guess enrollment is down across the board.
It's starting. Absolutely.
And with inflation and everything else going on, it's going to become even more unattainable for so many people.
Sure.
What are some of the trends we're seeing in terms of embracing education, but not putting all your eggs in the basket?
Sure. Well, that's a great question. So right now you're seeing a trend in a lot of institutions towards entrepreneurship. I think the institutions are finally catching up that there must be a change. They have to change. The world is evolving, so entrepreneurship is really opening up. That's a real major in a lot of schools. And I would encourage a lot of folks who are thinking or who have that entrepreneur, itch, that are thinking about that. You should definitely look into that. Look, we have to get to a place where we can walk and chew gum at the same time. And parents have to allow their students, their young people to grow and think as, individuals. Give them that space to sit down at a table as a young adult and say, this is what I'm thinking of doing, right? And instead of us judging them, because we judge them as parents because we want the best for them.
Of course.
But instead of us judging them, listen to hear if they're thinking about things strategically. So what you ultimately want your child to do is to grow up and to be self-sufficient and to be fulfilled. And if, becoming an entrepreneur and opening a business or doing whatever that they can do that is a good thing, that's elevating themselves, perhaps you should listen to them. And if they are passionate about something and they're going to stick it through, maybe that's a better investment than investing into, a college degree that they may never, utilize,
because
right?
That's what you're supposed to do.
Because that's what you're supposed to do. So we're in an age right now where the rules of engagement are completely, the world is upside down, It's really, things are kind of.
Hopefully we get right side back up.
Hopefully.
You mentioned something great, which was, I've seen it in my own circles and family members and friends, where the moms are reluctant to let, in these two specific instances I'm thinking about, their daughters go away to college.
Right.
because of what could happen to them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I was baffled. And I tried with all my compassion and my, smooth way of speaking to people to try and just not judge them, but just give them another perspective. Like, that's the most valuable thing I ever did, was get out of the Bronx.
Right.
Do you understand that you might be handicapping them by saying, hey, stay within driving distance of home?
Right.
And the parents just don't get it.
Yeah.
Because the parents, as you said, they want what's best for them.
Sure.
And I think we're in an age where danger or perceived danger is at an all-time low. Yet if you ask people, the world is falling apart.
Right.
I know getting to school when you were young was a lot more dangerous than it is now.
Right.
And I know I was walking to school. I think I asked my mom, I was like 8 years old. I started walking a mile to school or 3/4 of a mile, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And now, I wouldn't let my daughter walk across the pathway of my suburban neighborhood to go to school on her own at 7.
Right.
For obvious reasons,
Right.
but we want to keep our kids safe. But I think you hit the nail on the head. We're doing our kids a disservice. What, if anything, is a university system doing to engage parents? And have you seen any attention to this conversation in neighborhoods where college isn't necessarily the norm? So impoverished neighborhoods, neighborhoods of color. Are we seeing any kind of integration where the college not only gets the child involved, but the parents? Because the parents are just as ignorant, unfortunately, and maybe even more so than the kids, because maybe they came over and they worked their asses off to make sure that their kids had the opportunity to even go to college that they didn't have.
Right.
But it also it's short-sighted because they know that the value of hard work and trading your time for money. And again, it's that thing where your parents, in entrepreneurship, we always say, never ask anybody who doesn't have something you want how you should go about it.
Right.
Like, if I want to start a business, why the hell would I ask my mom?
Right.
She's never owned a business.
Right.
And I love my mother to death. It's not the person I would ask.
Right.
But we always go to the people we love the most, who have a limited range of knowledge.
Yeah, sure.
For advice.
Sure.
Are universities aware of this? Is there anything being done? Are they integrating other than the campus walkthroughs?
Right. So that is what I'm working to bring awareness to. It's this very dialogue. Because
perfect segue. We didn't even plan that, girl.
Yeah, we didn't It's this very dialogue that's so necessary. These conversations are not necessarily happening widespread. And I'm not going to say they're not happening, but it's not the norm. That would be the exception. These conversations would be the outliers. And they are so necessary because the world is so different. The student expectations are different. Students are digital native. They grow up with an iPad and an iPhone or whatever the case is, in their hands. That's just the reality. So by the time they get to an institution, the expectation is different. They're expecting things right away. They're expecting a digital world, and that's not what they're getting, right? So, and not only that, the conversation has always been one-sided. So institutions are having conversations. Certainly they're trying to figure out, how do we, grow funding? How do we maintain what's going on? What's our accreditation looks like? They're having these conversations. They're not having the conversations with the actual family members that are trying to get to the institutions. They only have the conversations that I'm aware of during orientations.
Right.
And at that point, right. So, and that's not really a conversation. It's more of, look at my campus and look at what we can offer to you. Unfortunately, FERPA is on campus, and it's for students. So it's student protection. So basically what it is, institutions can't share information about a student with their parents without the student signing off on it. It's like HIPAA. Exactly. Okay. Exactly. And as a result of that, a lot of things go uncatched. A lot of information that should be shared with parents are not shared. So look, you don't become an adult when you graduate from high school in 3 months. It just doesn't happen like that.
It took me another 15 years.
Right. It doesn't happen like that. So that is really a critical time where information should be shared with the parents. And parents need to understand that. But because there's FERPA, a lot of the information is not sent to the parents. So the students can't really make the decisions that they need to. And the information is not disseminated in the way where the students understand, and it doesn't trickle down to the parents. So there's a lot of misnomers going on out there. And there's a lot of dialogue that needs to happen. So we're raising awareness about having these dialogues. These dialogues should start in high school, where students are actually getting prepared to go to college or thinking about college. This is when you should start having these conversations with students. Is trade school a better option for you? Is college an option for you? Are you thinking about entrepreneurships? There are other ways to become successful. It's not only one way. And perhaps your way is to college, and that's okay. But you should, as an investor, think about all of the different avenues and what the best choice is for you, for your situation that will get you to a place where you can live a life that you want to live. So yeah, these conversations need to happen more. And they're not, and they're oftentimes happening peer-to-peer, not letting, different dynamic voices in the conversation. And it's imperative that it happens.
So talk to us a little bit more about what you do specifically and what your company's mission is. Sure. And, how you're changing the dynamic of how universities think about this whole process.
Sure. So thank you. Well, we look at higher education holistically. And that means, we understand that there are different stakeholders in higher education. We understand the students are the lifeblood. So every single thing that an institution does should be based on the student, and there should be no exception. So that's first and foremost. We think about the students in every single program that we help institutions run. When we're looking at an institution, if there's an issue with enrollment, we do a diagnostic. We're looking at everything. Is it the curriculum? Do the students not see what themselves in the curriculum? Is it dated? Is it relevant? So we're looking at everything. We do a deep dive really on the institution and come up with a report card, a scoring card based on peer institutions, industry trend. And from there, we go on to put programs together with institutions to help them retain their students and attract students. So that's one arm of the business. The other arm of the business is working with families and students and getting them prepared. Are you ready for college? Should you go to a 2-year institution before you go to a 4-year institution? What's the best investment for you? Should you go to a trade school? And we're looking at those things, and we have a conversation with both the parent and the student to have that open conversation where we're talking about different avenues that the student can take for the best outcome based on that individual. So that's a lot of work. It's not cookie cutter.
Of course.
Nothing is cookie cutter because every
individual. No two families are the same.
And no two institutions are the same. So that's the way we approach it. But we also know that without the students and the parents, the institutions can't move forward. So it's really bringing the two together, the different stakeholders together, so they can understand how important they are to each other, and finding that symbiotic relationship to show how we can move forward. I mean, if everyone is on the same page, then society becomes better, and that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to change the landscape and create programming that's relevant for students, that actually set the American student up for success in the global market. We're no longer just, in this one place. People are able to interact across the world in different time zones. So preparing people and institutions for that. If an institution is looking to spread their digital landscape, as far as online courses, helping them stand that up. So we do many different things, but ultimately, it's about driving education, driving, betterment for society, for people. And I'm super passionate about that because it comes in so many different flavors. I didn't want to work in an organization where I just did one thing, because I believe we all are multifaceted. You just have to find what you're passionate about and go with that, and, position yourself where you can help others. So that's what we do. It's a lot of hard work because no day is alike.
Right.
it's a different day, it's a different project every day, but it's wonderful. It's hard work, but it's good work.
And you mentioned passion. When would you say, since you were fortunate enough to find yours, when and how did you find it? Because I think so many people struggle with that. Yeah. Irregardless of where they're from, what their background is. We're all looking for the thing that we want to get up and do every day. And myself included, it has been, lulls in my life, years even, where I just kind of going with the flow. What was it for you?
For me, gosh, I've always wanted to do my own thing. I've been fortunate where I've been put in positions of leadership, and been blessed to have met many good people, good leaders. But I've always felt like I wanted to do more. I always felt limited in those spaces, and I wanted to create a space for myself where I could expand. I always felt like when I was in positions, I had to contract. I couldn't be my authentic self. I couldn't show up as me. I had to show up as someone else. I couldn't outshine anyone. If I had a boss, I couldn't come up with a better idea. Or if I came up with an idea, I had to give that idea and have my boss vet it before me. And it limited me. And I often found myself unfulfilled. And I was doing things, making great money, right? Making great money, but not really feeling fulfilled. And, looking at, okay, you're making money. And in some cases, you're taking money from people that not necessarily, need to spend this money. You got to find a way to channel that energy in doing something good. And it was just something that I wanted to do. I believed in myself. I've always believed in myself, where others, they struggle with that. But my mindset is you can only bet on yourself, right? You have to know yourself. And it takes time to understand oneself and understand your weaknesses and strengths. But once you do understand, then it's up to you to, work for someone else or step out on a limb and bring the gifts to the world that you encompass. And that's really, one day I just was like, I want to do something else. I want to stay within the industry that I'm in, but I want to make real impact where I can look back in 10, 20 years and I can say, I did that.
Usually that comes as a result of pain. You'd had enough. Yeah. Was it playing small because being in that setting, you didn't say it, I'm going to go out on a limb and say it, being a woman of color, highly educated, may not want to hear your opinion sometimes. Right. It may not be as valued as that of a male or a Caucasian male or a light-skinned male or whatever. Right. Was that a pain point for you, and was that a driving force in you moving into your own business and becoming an entrepreneur?
That's always a pain point. I think every woman knows that. If you want to be honest, that's always a pain point. You're always trying to measure up, and many times you're often more qualified. You're often more educated. You're just a better communicator, but you have to take the back seat. So I was tired of taking the back seat, and I didn't think I had to. So and it's not only, sometimes you should take the back seat because you don't necessarily know what to do. I believe that every good leader knows when to lead and when to be led. So having the wisdom and being able to discern between, I probably should stay in my lane, or you know what, it's time for me to move on and become who I'm supposed to become. You really have to know how to discern that. And for me, I was at a point where, I said, this is really what I want to do. And I can bring some value, not only to institutions, but to lives. And for me, that's better than, a career. I think if you're doing the right thing, and if your product, whatever you're selling, if you're selling something that is of value, others will see and monies will come and, success will come. But it has to start from somewhere. It has to start from something meaningful. And people will see if it's meaningful or not. And not everything is for everyone, and that's okay. But in this particular, business that I'm in, millions of people go to college.
Right.
Millions of people go to college. College is a multi-billion-dollar operation. Whether people want to realize that or not, that's the empirical data. There's facts behind that. So if my organization, my firm can do something to help individuals understand that and navigate the complexities of colleges and universities understand and navigate the complexities of their students and the changing demographic, everyone wins.
Who were some of your early mentors in life, but then also in this career path that you've chosen to undertake?
Yeah. Oh, my early mentors in life, so many. I lean a lot on my family. My dad was an educator for many, many years. It was funny, we were saying, you usually go to people that don't know a lot.
Right.
But, I've been fortunate. My dad was an educator. My mom went to college. She was a social worker. So, the relationship building, the relationship with people and making those authentic connections, I got that from my parents, because they were always people, they spoke to people. You don't want to say the cliche, I'm a people person.
Right.
But I kind of grew up with that. They were always great communicators. They always, teacher and educator, my dad and a social worker, always trying to help people. So they modeled that behavior for me. And that's what the environment I grew up in. So it was a natural kind of thing for me. And then I just felt that, I had the ability to connect with people. I think that's a lost art where, people don't know how to sit down and have a conversation. They don't know how to look you in your eye. They're like on their phones. So that human connection, I think there is a missing element. That's what's missing. And I think people need more of that. So my parents, they were my first mentors. And again, I was just a smart kid that always very inquisitive, always went out on a limb. It's like, if there's a project, I want to do it. So I think
you had that confidence. You had that support system there. My last guest, we just wrapped up the show on the same importance.
Yeah.
And I think why, what's something close to my heart is just, kind of bolstering communities of color. And the system's never going to be for us.
Right.
It's just the system.
Right.
And it's been against us. And maybe one day it'll treat us completely fairly, but it's never going to just be like, here in your favor.
Right.
And it's much easier, I think, for us to go back and plant seeds of change and become mentors or build families.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the most underrated thing that is lacking in our communities is that family dynamic. Generations maybe will get to healthier family dynamics like yours or like mine is now. But again, it comes over time and it comes with consistency. And you hit the nail on the head when you said so many things about knowing who you are, knowing how to stay in your lane. And I always tell young people when I meet them at conferences or speaking engagements, I'm like, the one thing nobody's ever going to tell you that I hope you remember that I'm going to leave with you is patience.
Yeah.
You do not know who you are right now. And the only way that you're going to discover who you are is to go on the journey of life.
Yep.
Make mistakes, take chances, fail, get up, just don't quit, and you'll know who you're not.
Absolutely.
Which will eventually get you to who you are.
Yes.
But you will be very, very hard pressed to find that person before you're in your 30s.
Absolutely.
Or even 40s. And some people don't find it until their 50s.
Yeah.
But just don't give up.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's the importance of legacy, the importance of patience, and the importance of playing the long game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Family is a long game. And I think communities in general, but communities like inner city where we come from, it's not as prevalent. You come from a Caribbean, background where family's a little more, I guess.
It's central.
Central.
Yeah, it's central. It's central. It's so important.
Yes,
it's so important.
Caribbean has that vibe. We don't see it so much when we get to the Americas. And even American culture is very dismissive of our older generation.
Yeah.
It's not as embracing as other cultures where they honor their wisdom of older people.
Yeah.
We put them in homes.
Yeah.
It's laughable. I don't know that that's something that America is just about, or maybe it's because it's the business of, hey, we can take these old people who are burdens off your hands for the low price of. And again, it goes down to business. I don't know if that's part of it, but I think the family dynamic is something that, and much to your desire to step in and educate families on the decision of which college they're going to choose.
Absolutely.
Because the parents most likely are picking up some of the tab.
A lot of it.
Yeah.
A lot of it the parents pick up. It really is a family decision. It really is. And it is central to those people that are fortunate to have a family. But even to those folks that don't have a family, family is about building networks. It's about building support systems. It's about that. It's about being vulnerable and finding your person or your persons, right?
Yeah, your tribe for sure.
Yeah, you got to find your tribe, and that's what people do.
Chosen family.
Yeah, you have to figure that out. So it doesn't necessarily have to be your biological family, but people that you can feel safe with, where you can make decisions with. It's critical. It really is. That's what's helped me. And I've been super fortunate because I do lean on my family a lot. And I have children that, pay attention to what it is I do and what I'm doing. And, certainly bringing them on into the family business nice. Because, they're entrepreneurs and they're looking at that. So it's nice. We talk about it all the time. I have a lot of young people that are in college in my family, which is really nice. And, that's how I get a lot of my inspiration, because I hear some of their pain and, I wish this was this, and, have those forums with them, which is really nice. And we're able to talk to a lot of different students just to make sure that we're on the beat or on the pulse of what's going on. And when we're speaking to institutions or we're speaking to family, we're bringing relevant, live, real, empirical data to them that, they can take it to the bank. But,
and hopefully use to create some change and a better experience.
Absolutely.
Not only for the student, but for those phone calls at 9:30 at night that I personally don't pick up. So I just want to thank you so much for coming out, for sharing your story, your mission. Tell our audience a little bit more about how they can find out more about you.
Sure.
And how your organization can possibly help them.
Sure. So if you guys need any kind of help, certainly you can reach out to ANC.Consulting. That's ANC.Consulting. And then you could check us out on IG. We're ANC Consulting 1 on IG. And then I'm on LinkedIn at Angelina Carvalhal 2. We would love to work with any family that needs any assistance trying to figure out, we create roadmaps for families. And then for institutions that are looking to bolster their enrollments, we are more than happy to engage with you and figure out ways to craft, unique situations where you can actually drive some enrollments and stabilize your revenue stream. So check us out.
Awesome. Thank you again for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure to learn so much about how the education system is and shifting to become more marketable in the future. So I just wanted to thank Dr. Angelina Carvalhal for coming out today and educating us on this valuable, valuable subject. You can find more information about her and her mission in the bio. As always, thank you for tuning in. See you next week. Let's get it.